I started to wonder if I was viewing it in totally the wrong way,
Right.
and that to not swing for the fences, that is like actually sort of like selling out the community that had been on this 13-year journey.
Welcome to Spotlight On, a podcast about how companies are built from the people doing the building, one messy, exhilarating decision at a time.
Welcome to Spotlight On. I'm Miles Clements, and I'm here with Laravel's founder and CEO, Taylor Otwell. Taylor, I think everybody knows, but for those who don't, what is Laravel?
Yeah, so Laravel is an open source PHP framework that I created way back in late 2010. I started working on it. I released it in 2011. It's basically a starting point for building any kind of web application. Could be booking system, invoicing system. People use it for all sorts of crazy things. Even cool people like Milwaukee Bucks, Harvard Art Museum are using Laravel to build all sorts of applications.
So take us back to the beginning. You mentioned you got started on this in like 2010. What were you doing at the time? What were like the earliest days of Laravel?
Yeah, so I was only a couple of years out of college, actually, and I was working at a large trucking company in Arkansas. I was writing enterprise.
This is how every huge opportunity got started.
This is where it all starts for everyone. I was writing a lot of enterprise code, a lot of .NET, a lot of COBOL, which goes back into the 1960s. I routinely worked on programs that were written before I was born. It was not rare at all to see that. But I really just had I always wanted to build my own business. I had just random startup ideas, like a lot of founders have in the beginning. And I needed a quick way to prototype those ideas. And
you gotta give me, what was a bad startup idea? Like what was?
Oh gosh, I wanted to write like a billing system for lawn care companies.
Yeah, we would not have funded that.
Yeah. But I needed a quick way to build these ideas and at least see if there was anything to them. And so I built Laravel as a way to build web applications really quickly in PHP.
And then when did you realize that you were onto something? You'd cycled through a couple of ideas that you didn't pursue full time. When did you know you had something?
Yeah, so like I said, I worked on Laravel for probably 8 months to a year before I released it publicly. The first day I released it publicly, I think I got 4 stars on GitHub. So it was definitely not an overnight sensation, but a lot of people did latch onto it relatively quickly and became just incredibly passionate about the framework, almost to like a fanatical sense, to where now you have people with Laravel tattoos and
we'll get to that.
Yeah. But I think people were just ready for a breath of fresh air in PHP, and Laravel arrived kind of in the right place at the right time to take advantage of that.
Do you remember what some of the early use cases were that you observed in the wild?
Yeah. So this is kind of a small world story, but one of the first companies I ever heard use Laravel was actually also in Arkansas. And they were another trucking company in Arkansas, up in Northwest Arkansas, near Bentonville. The Pan Transportation is the company. And they were on Laravel 1.0, commercially in the business.
So you've brought up, okay, we're like 2 minutes in, and you've brought up Arkansas twice. So I'm just going to go straight there. So you started this company in Little Rock.
Basically, yeah.
You basically have bootstrapped the entire thing from Little Rock. I think for a lot of founders out there, the activation energy to go start a company just seems really intimidating. And people think I've got to go get this really high quality Series A, and I probably need to move to Silicon Valley. And there's all these other things that I have to do. Yet you kind of built this empire from your home in Little Rock. Why'd you bootstrap, and why'd you make us come find you after all these years?
I think back when I first started Laravel, a lot of it was just, that's where I was. And I think if I would have been out here, I almost fear I would have been intimidated to some extent by so many people are doing awesome things in San Francisco. And in Arkansas, I didn't know anyone else building a business. And I didn't really get distracted or intimidated by what other people were doing because I wasn't out here. I didn't know them. So I just really focused, kind of laser focused on Laravel and really never let anything distract me from that once I got started.
If you had to start something else again tomorrow, would you bootstrap and do it the same way?
Not necessarily, I think. I think part of that is because of the good relationship we've had between Laravel and Accel, and seeing how beneficial that can be. I think some people, it's probably up to personal preference, but I think a lot of ideas, there's just great value in what venture capital can provide, especially great firms like Accel, and who they can network you with and the advice they can give you and help you build a business together.
Right. What were the advantages of bootstrapping? I mean, one of the things that always struck me about you is just like the level of original thought. Like you don't have a lot of the preconceived notions that there is a lot of great that comes from Silicon Valley, obviously. But there's also just a lot of templates and things that are perceived as best practices. And I just always like saw this authenticity in you in the way that you were building the company. Do you think there were any advantages from doing this kind of off the grid a little bit?
Yeah, I think it does go back to what I said about just distractions. Like when you're building a business, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down and get distracted by rather than just making the product really great.
Right.
And that's what I did for so many years at Laravel. That's what I still am most passionately obsessed with at Laravel, is making sure that Laravel Forge, Laravel Cloud, Nightwatch are just amazing products.
Right.
And I think if you build amazing products, things tend to work out. You know, if you build amazing products for customers and they love to use them, things usually go well, you know? And I think, you know, with the bootstrap thing, I think bootstrapping is great and it gives you a lot of maybe personal freedom or lifestyle freedom in how you run the business and how you want to structure things. I think looking back, if there's anything bootstrapping held me back from, it was sometimes you are more personally incentivized to benefit yourself rather than the company, if that makes sense. Taking ambitious risks are not really in the bootstrapper DNA. It's a little bit more of a conservative playbook of building kind of a sustainable business and not really swinging for the fences in many cases, at least. And I think that's one, if I had to look back, that's one thing that held me back in the bootstrapped era of Laravel, is not building the products that I think our customers deserved because they were so ambitious, and there's a little bit of risk involved when you build ambitious products. And, you know, but I'm happy that we're finally tackling those now.
Yeah. When you think about like, not just the evolution of Laravel, but like the evolution of Taylor, the founder, you feel like you needed a couple of years of just getting your confidence and seeing the community take off and seeing the product adoption, like that gave you the sort of the faith that you could like go build a business around it?
I think so, yeah. And in many ways, I was always just solving my own problems to some extent. Like I built Laravel because I needed a way to build web applications quickly. I built Laravel Forge, our first commercial product, because I needed to create servers quickly. And I thought other people probably had this problem too. I've always been a little bit pessimistic when I build products. I remember when I first built Forge talking to my wife about how I hope it just kind of covers like our house payment or something. And, you know, within like a month of launching, I was making more on Forge than I was making in my day job. And now, you know, like I'm full-time working on Laravel and life changes quickly.
Right.
So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
You can't talk about Laravel without talking about the community. In the early days, like what were the first signs that this community was as active and engaged as it always has been?
You know, some of the early signs were when I first launched Laravel, we had sort of like discussion forums that users could go out and participate in, ask questions, give feedback. And there were people in those forums like 24 hours a day, it seemed like. They just lived and breathed Laravel. And I think there are certain open source projects, typically frameworks like Laravel or like React or like Vue.js, where your tool has such an impact on someone's daily work because they're using it 8 hours a day at their job, to where if you're making their work life better by this tool you've created and it's actually a joy for them to use every day, that's like a huge impact to have on someone's personal life, I think. And I think when a tool has that kind of impact, it's like natural to feel, you just feel like very attached to that tool. And that's where you see these like kind of fandoms develop around open source tools, where it's like, especially for PHP, when I think back to 2010, 2011, a lot of PHP developers were contemplating jumping ship. Like, hey, like, JavaScript or Node or Ruby or Python has all these cool tools and people are doing interesting things. They're building new frameworks, new open source libraries, and it feels like PHP is kind of stagnant. And I think Laravel just like kind of came on the scene at the perfect time, to where I remember when I was participating in like PHP, you know, like chats and stuff online, people were like, maybe I should go learn this or go learn that. And when Laravel came out, it was like the whole discourse shifted to like, oh, we have something cool now that like we can actually build web applications with. And I think a lot of people, it was such a breath of fresh air for them that they just developed like a strong attachment to like this tool that had brought them so much more productivity and so much more enjoyment to their
Right,
daily job.
right. The Laravel community is known for being very kind and supportive, like also ambitious as hell, but very positive. And like, there's just so many negative communities out there these days. How did it get started? How have you made it so positive? Like, you're not going to like this description, but is it fair to say that, when you were quietly bootstrapping this company, the community was sort of built like in your image, like it's very supportive and humble?
Yeah, it was actually intentional from the very beginning. And I remember when I first released Laravel actually having, an intentional sense of direction of what I wanted the community to look like. And a lot of it was driven by, I felt like everyone at some level wants to be a part of something. It could be a sports team or a community service project or an open source project. And an open source project is a really interesting concept because anyone in the world can come together and participate and contribute to this project, regardless of where they live in the world, what their background is, what their even like socioeconomic status is. They're all contributing to like the same goal.
Right.
And it builds this like deep sense of community. And I felt like if I could foster that and give a place for people to belong and contribute and have fun together building a cool project, that people would just latch onto it because people want that somewhere.
Right.
And Laravel has been a place where, thousands of developers now have found a place to hang out and contribute and be a part of something, much bigger than they might otherwise be a part of.
Right. Yeah, I remember you said something early on, which was, and I'm going to botch the quote, but it was like, look, when I go on Twitter, I read about all the cool kid projects, and it seems like the world is migrating to these really cutting edge open source frameworks. But like when I go out into the real world, the world runs on PHP.
Yeah.
And,
it goes back to the very beginning, like the company I was working at runs on COBOL. So which is much older than PHP. And, there's just a broad swath of software out there. The majority of software probably runs on tech that maybe in Silicon Valley would be considered not glamorous, but it's just the reality is that's what a bunch of the world runs on.
Right.
And, so I'm here to serve those people.
Well, and the other funny anecdote is you remember my partner Casey put together with Dan Levine our open source conference last year, and we had this fun dinner. It was a bunch of open source founders, and I think it's some of the most thoughtful, forward-looking open source founders in the world. And Kramer stood up and he was like, go around the table, everyone say, if you had to start a new company today, what is like the language of choice, and you can't pick your own. And people threw out all these ideas, and it was like, not great for mobile, not fast enough, hard to, not enough, the talent pool's not deep enough. And then at the end, the room was kind of like, well, shit, I guess we'd use Laravel and PHP, and that's like such an encapsulation of, why you guys have been right to stick to your knitting.
Yeah, well, I agree with them. It would definitely be the fastest way for them to get started. Yeah.
Right. What was the first time that you realized there was like commercial interest in Laravel? Because you started building and then the community grew very quickly and there's this huge, vibrant open source community around it. What was the first time you thought, maybe I should charge for a commercial version?
Yeah, I some of those early Laracons, people would come up to me and say, hey, thanks for building Laravel. Our company's making $50 million a year using your framework. And I'm like, if you're making that, maybe there's some money to be made for me, in this story.
Right.
Back when Laravel was purely open source and I really wasn't making any money on it at all. Those kind of stories got my wheels turning a little bit.
So you knew that you had this incredibly popular framework and there was this very vibrant community forming around it. You made the decision to commercialize. Was that controversial at the time? And how did you view the trade-off between open source and commercial?
Yeah, it's a good question. I worried it would be controversial. I was really paranoid about that, honestly. And it ended up not being as controversial as I expected. I think if you build an open source library and it becomes popular, you will have to cross this bridge of how do I actually keep working on this thing in a sustainable way? Because if you don't find a way to commercialize it in some way, presumably you're having to work on it in your free time and then you're staying up till 2 a.m. working on your open source project after working your day job. And it's just not sustainable. You know? So I think every big open source maintainer eventually faces this crisis and either they find a way to commercialize or at least put commercial products around the core open source products in a way that complements it.
Right.
Or they just burn out or have to kind of move to like a committee-based open source maintenance model, which is never as good.
Right.
And, but everyone has to cross this bridge. And I was worried it would be controversial, but it really wasn't as much as I expected, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we met the first time, one of our many slides was, we thought you were going to be this like non-commercial dude from Little Rock who we were going to have to like explain this to. And we had this slide. It was like the commercialization flywheel, and the best open source projects actually have this monetization flywheel where the project earns money from customers and you pour that into R&D. And you were like,
yeah, guys, I got it. Have you heard of making money before?
You were like, I understand. We're like, okay, next slide. And then the conversation went better places from there. And then like talk through the action, because as I perceived it, it sort of seemed like at a certain point you said, well, let's throw up a paywall. And, these companies that are managing 50 servers per month, maybe they should pay us $500 and we'll see what happens. When did you sort of experiment with the pricing model for the first time?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I feel like I've always been a little bit historically bad at pricing. But, the first time, so from 2011 to 2014, Laravel was only an open source framework. There was no other commercial offerings built around that framework. And 2014 is the first time we launched Laravel Forge, and our pricing plans were something like $10 a month and $20 a month, with $20 a month being the absolute maximum you could pay us.
Right.
And a lot of it was me not knowing what I was doing, just launching my first product and experimenting. And I was always scared to like scare off the community. I think open source and commercial products always has like a bit of a tension when you're a company that has an open source product that you're building commercial services around. People are always nervous that you're going to neglect what they came to you for, which is usually the open source stuff that funneled them into your commercial products. So that's something I'm always conscientious about, as far as making sure that Laravel as an open source framework is always totally top notch, and that we're giving it the attention it deserves, and then building great commercial experiences around that.
Right. So maybe let's talk for a second about when we met and when, Accel came into the picture. And obviously, I mean, Laravel was this incredible thing, this vibrant community long before Accel was around. And we had just been for years like fascinated in what you were building. So you start receiving this like flurry of emails and inbound phone calls and things in the mail and like random outreaches from a venture firm. Like, I've never asked you this. What were you thinking when you started hearing from us?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would get emails like that probably weekly, and I usually didn't know which ones were legit, which ones were sort of shady. And so I would usually just hit the old delete button on the keyboard. But, when we actually got in touch was when I think Accel started attending Laracons and kind of getting face-to-face, introducing ourselves. So there's a little bit more personal connection there.
Yeah.
And actually Accel was the only firm that actually did that and put in the legwork to do that. So, I appreciated that. And that's when I think we actually got a real conversation going.
What caused the change? Was it like a conversation with Abigail? Was it looking at like the business plan? I doubt it was that. Like, what caused you to want to do it?
I think it was just like a deep reflection on the entire journey that I'd been on so far. And the original reason I had hesitance to raise money or do anything like that was I feared that the community would see it as sort of like selling out in a way. And the more I thought about it like deeply, I started to wonder if I was viewing it in totally the wrong way. And that to not swing for the fences is really the selling out like position, to like continue on the trajectory I was on. I had basically built most things I wanted to build and had the ability to build with the team I had. And the company was making good money and I was making good money. And to me, to coast on that trajectory, that is like actually sort of like selling out the community that had been on this 13-year journey, rather than build awesome new ambitious products like Laravel Cloud and Nightwatch that are going to take more resources and they're going to be harder than anything we ever built before. But they're what the community that's been on this journey with us so far, and honestly been on this journey with me personally, so far, what they deserve and what I think we need to give them.
Now, I'm going to ask for feedback, which is a dangerous thing to do on a podcast. But I mean, look, I think the gist of our pitch was you keep doing exactly what you're doing. You control the company. You're the CEO of the company. All we want is to invest in your product vision. So not much is going to change. We're just going to give you a lot more resources to go do it. Does it feel like that's been roughly how it's played out?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair to say how it's played out, and I think the connections that we've been able to make through Accel have been really helpful in building Laravel Cloud. Just even as introductions to people that can help us on this journey has been extremely helpful. But really, we've just been building the roadmap we talked about in Little Rock, from that first meeting is basically the playbook we've played and the products we've built. And so, yeah, it's been a great partnership so far.
What has been the biggest trade-off? I mean, I won't have my feelings hurt, but, we just had a board meeting this morning.
Right.
You didn't historically have board meetings.
Right.
You don't have 6 people to manage. You have dozens of people to manage. I'm sure some bad comes with the good. Like what's the warning that you would give a current bootstrapper who's thinking about raising money? And you might say, hey, overall, this is worth doing, but this is something you should be aware of that's tough. Like what's been the hardest part of it?
I think it's just a little bit of a mentality shift going from waking up every morning and sort of doing what you want to do, but maybe not pushing it too hard and just keeping the business going versus like, let's make Laravel one of the best companies in the world. That's just a much more ambitious goal.
Right.
And so that comes with things that are different than bootstrapping. It comes with, more people to manage. It comes with a few more meetings, although I only really am up to maybe like 4 meetings a week usually, which is...
I really try to pick my battles. Like I really stay off your calendar.
Yeah. But, I feel like I needed that to some extent, I needed a new challenge. I needed to grow in new areas and maybe push my comfort zones a little bit just to grow myself professionally, personally, and, as a business or as a product builder, as a CEO, I needed that fresh challenge.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it was completely mutual because we were like fascinated outside in, but I don't think you really, really understand what's special about Laravel until you do go meet the community and you go to Laracon. And so, it was cool. I mean, we did it in Nashville. We were in India. We were in Portugal. And you really feel like the metrics speak for themselves. But then when you understand the substance around it, like that got us really excited about it too.
Yeah. I think the different, like when I go to Laracon, when I go to other conferences, I think one of the stark differences is that at Laracon, most people are actually watching what's happening on stage. Whereas you go to a lot of tech events and most people are in the hallway or on their laptop or just socializing. But, with Laravel, I feel like everyone's just locked in to what's happening on stage.
Right. So to go into that process a little bit. So I think it took us a little while, but we convinced you to come out here and we're get to know us, get to know some of the folks around the Accel family. We introduced you to David Kramer from Sentry, well known to the pod, well known to the Laravel community. And I remember sort of putting you guys in a room together and then I just walked away and hoped for the best. He's a very candid dude. What did you guys talk about?
I think we talked a lot about our shared background as founders that started just as programmers. And I think David and I relate to each other on that way, that in that way that we both started as just developers that had product ideas and wanted to build them. And so there's always, among developers that I think found companies, there's always a little bit of camaraderie there because we have similar backstories. And we just talked a little bit about that journey from going from a developer to being the CEO of a company, and what that means and what mentality you need to bring to it. When we embark on this journey, we really are embarking on a journey to make Laravel the biggest, best Laravel it can possibly be. And if that's not your goal, then this isn't the journey for you. You know what I mean? And that was really helpful for me when he told me if you want to do this, that needs to be your mindset.
Right.
And that's in contrast to the bootstrapped mindset in many ways.
Right.
And that's kind of the core nugget I took away from that meeting to really chew on and think about.
Yeah. I think you sort of talked a little bit about the journey from being a developer to being a founder to now being a CEO and manager of dozens of people. What has that been like?
It's been a stretch for me personally. It stretched my comfort zone. I am really kind of a quiet person. I'm not a super big yapper. I don't do a lot of talking. I prefer to sit and think about a problem. And I love to write a good manifesto about the problem and just sort of align everyone around it. But as you grow the company, you have to stretch a little bit. Like I said, I've gone from 0 meetings over a 3-year period or more to now having 4 or 5 meetings a week with our cloud team, our core services team, our night watch team, and then kind of one-on-ones with various people. And so that's added a few more meetings to my calendar, but honestly, it's been totally doable and manageable. And like I said, I kind of needed to push myself, out of my comfort zone a little bit. So it's been helpful in doing that.
Coming out of Laracon, you've announced cloud, you've announced night watch. Does it feel like this has all been worthwhile so far?
Yeah, I think it's been totally worthwhile. I mean, Laravel Cloud and Nightwatch are the best products we've ever built. And I'm super excited to get them out there because it really feels like I always wanted Laravel to be the greatest developer experience from local development when you first start your project on your own laptop to shipping that out into production and being live on the web. And I think cloud really completes that going live on the web story for Laravel in a way that is what I always wanted, way back in 2011 when if I had the grandest vision of Laravel, cloud is in many ways the culmination of that, making it so easy to ship and scale your Laravel products is what I always wanted. So getting to finally ship that to our community makes it worthwhile.
Right. Let's dive into that a little bit. How have you made the company more scalable? Like, it's pretty amazing that you can still basically only have four meetings a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's intimidating to a lot of founders to go from, small to big really quickly and have a big team. What have been your secrets to scaling and how has it helped to have a team around you?
Yeah. So some of the things I've tried to do and the kinds of people we've tried to hire and really the kinds of people I like to work with the best are people that I can trust to have a high sense of agency on their own. For me to be able to give them a few paragraphs about a problem, maybe in one of our products, and for them to run with that and deliver a really great solution with a lot of taste and thought behind it and bring it back to me and be like, and it's like, yes, this is totally what I would have done,
Right.
And it's just sort of cultivating and getting the right people in the right positions to where you can run the company that way and have just a high level of trust in your leadership and sort of your best performers and your dev team leads to be able to really deliver thoughtful solutions with relatively minimal structure or boundaries. Here's a problem, go solve it in the way you think is best. And hopefully I've distilled my personal product tastes into the leaders at the company to where they sort of intuitively know oh, wouldn't it be great if it worked this way?
Right.
And we just kind of collaborate in this very delightful way at the end of the day. And to me, that's the perfect way to work because that's how you keep out of, 50 meetings a week or whatever, where you have to micromanage every detail of the product because I don't really want to work that way. And I think actually other people don't want to work that way either.
Right.
They would prefer to have a sense of creativity around the product. And I think about that with Cloud and Nightwatch, and maybe even Nightwatch in particular, where most of that team is in Australia and some in Japan. And so we just are forced to be pretty async in how we build that product. And that team has to have a lot of their own sense of direction, their sense of style, their sense of taste that they're bringing to the product on top of the feedback I'm giving them, or it just won't work because we're so far apart geographically. And I think that's how the best devs and the best product people want to work. They want to be able to express their own creative freedom in the product and put their stamp on it as well.
Right. Very cool. So just to give some context on the growth of the company, give us the snapshot. What did Laravel look like 12 months ago versus what does the company look like today?
So a year ago, which is, roughly right before we partnered with Accel, we were about 10 people. It was myself, something like 8 engineers and a customer support tech. And that was the entire company. We had no marketing, we had no sales, we had no design even full time. That was just on a contractor basis. And now we're at about 50 people, multiple designers, more engineers, dedicated infrastructure staff. We've actually got a marketing team. Our marketing department is not just me tweeting anymore. We've got real people thinking about marketing, which is awesome. And it's people that complement me. And, this goes all the way up to our COO president, Tom Crary, who came over from Pond 5, who I think is a great complement to my skill set.
Right.
I do a lot of technical product thinking. He brings a really great business mind to the company that in many ways complements my more like technical product skill set.
Right.
So I think that's been a great match. And just honestly, everyone we've brought into the company almost has been totally awesome to work with. And that's been something that Tom and I have been super aligned on, is maintaining Laravel's great culture of people that just want to come in and make an impact and build awesome products for a great community.
Right.
And that's what we've been focused on with every hire, basically. So it's been an awesome journey building up to this amount of people. I'm sure we'll hire more in the coming year. And, you know, I just loved working with these great people so far.
Well, the other thing that's been cool about the people that have come into the company is that you've really hired a lot from within the community. So these are people with whom you've had years of, you know, experience. Some you've known personally, but you've known their work product for a long time. And so again, everything that you've done is just very authentic to the Laravel community. I want to talk about Tom a little bit in a way that's going to make Tom blush. So Tom Crary, as you mentioned, joined the company as kind of your like business partner. He was one of the first outside business hire. And outside in, it seems like the combination has been awesome and you two work together really well. How important is that first hire, like that first executive hire when you're going from being, a small project to like an aspirational company?
I think it's actually way more important than I realized even when we brought Tom on. You know, it's something I've only seen in hindsight as we've worked well together and have found alignment in how we would like to run the company and what we believe in, what we think is important. And I think looking back, you could definitely go really wrong with that. And I could see how it'd be extremely painful. So I'm glad it's worked out for us. But I think in hindsight, I actually did not realize actually how important that was going to be. And, you know, it's been great because Tom is very complimentary to me in terms of what I bring to the table, what he brings to the table. Like, you know, for example, like if we wanted to use a piece of software at Laravel to build cloud, a vendor or something, and they gave me a price, I would be like, oh, great. That sounds great. Right. Yeah, sure. Where do I sign? You know, Tom would be like, no way is that the price, you know, like, and so we're just different in that way, but it's in a very complimentary way that I think is great for Laravel.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you guys only hire humble people and Tom is the embodiment of that. But I've also just observed that you do excel when you can like sit in a quiet place and think and write a manifesto. And then Tom sort of has this way of amplifying that to the rest of the company, you know, like he in some ways makes you scalable. Yeah. And it's just been an awesome partnership to watch.
Yeah, it's been great.
Let's talk about the future for a second. So you did this awesome Aaron Francis conversation where you were going sort of step by step on outlining the vision for cloud. I'm not going to ask you those questions because I won't do it as well as Aaron did. But like fast forward 5 years, like what are the possibilities for Laravel?
Yeah, so if I think 5 years in the future, we want cloud to obviously be the obvious choice for shipping and scaling, Laravel apps for shipping and scaling, just PHP apps in general, let's say. I think there's worlds where we make it just the best place to ship any backend web application. I think that's something we can explore. But we're definitely going to nail that Laravel story first because I think Laravel is the best way to build web apps. You know, so I think if people are starting a new web app today, I want it to be on Laravel. And cloud's going to be the best place to ship that. And we'll explore what else might be great to ship there in the future. We want Nightwatch to be providing amazing insights in those Laravel apps, but not only providing the insights, but also potentially fixing things in your app. So one of the benefits we have at Laravel is we build the framework, we build the platform for shipping it, but we can also build tools for monitoring it. Right. And we can use a lot of the data and intelligence we have there to really make intelligent suggestions on how you should build your app, best practices, security fixes, performance improvements, and we can just PR those straight to your repository on GitHub and ship them out to cloud for you. So I think we have lots of really interesting ideas for how all of this could tie together to just be an awesome experience for building web applications. And in 5 years, you know, it's going to be fun to look back and see, you know, what all is in there, but I think it's going to be really exciting.
The thing that's been really cool for me to watch is just the center of gravity that the company still has. Like, again, we just had a board meeting And the first slide of every board meeting is like, first thing that we talk about, the number one, North Star for the company is the community. Serving the community, providing the products that customers want, community vibrancy. And if we lose sight of that, nothing else matters. I do think that this first principle thinking is kind of a function of having Bootstrap for a long time. And I really appreciate that everything you guys always do is really grounded in like those fundamentals. Dude, this was a lot of fun. It's always fun chatting with you. Thanks so much for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.